Hello and welcome to News Central Now, coming to you live from our studio in Nigeria. I'm Joe Hansen, and here are the top stories at this hour. Governor Boko Matawalle of Nigeria's northwestern state of Zamfara suspends traditional head for honoring military officer arrested for selling live ammunition to bandits. Morocco security authorities seize 4.7 tons of cannabis in northern city of Nador. Ghana's Ministry of Youth and Sports approves return of football fans to stadiums to watch matches. Get the stories here in a moment. We begin in West Africa, where the governor of Nigeria's northwestern state of Zamfara, Boko Matawalle, has suspended a traditional head for honoring a military officer who was arrested for selling live ammunition to bandits. Matawalle said in a statement that the suspension of Surajo Ibrahim, the district head of Badarawa in Shinkafi Emirate Council, is indefinite. According to the governor, the traditional title bestowed on the affected military officer attached to Shinkafi was for no reason of significant contribution to the development of the area. He also warned all traditional rulers in Zamfara to seek approval before conferring traditional titles on people. Matawalle said the action became pertinent in order to avoid unnecessary embarrassment to the state government and its traditional institutions. Meanwhile, 7 security personnel have been arrested by the police in Nigeria for assisting bandits in the northwest state of Zamfara. A State's Commissioner for Information, Ibrahim Dosara, at a joint press briefing, explained that the men had been supplying bandits with military fatigues, arms and ammunition. During interrogation, the suspects also confessed to revealing troops' movements to the bandits to stop their apprehension by security personnel. Well, moving on now, and joining me to discuss this is editor, the Avalon security expert, Ayodele Lawal Adio. Thank you so much for joining us on News Central Now.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be on.
All right, so let's kick this off by asking, members of the security forces have been caught assisting bandits in Zamfara state with uniforms, weapons and ammunition. Shouldn't security agencies begin looking within for the enemy?
Of course, they have to do a lot more due diligence, and they have to look inwards to be sure that the people that they place in certain strategic, to oversee certain strategic assets are properly vetted, not just by the police themselves, but by the intelligence agencies, to be ensured that there are very little or no leaks. Because clearly, the speed of attacks and the intelligence behind many attacks that we have seen recently suggests that there have been internal collaborators, and except those internal collaborators are fished out by the security agencies, they will continue to sabotage the efforts of our military personnel on ground, and of course the larger, broader national security strategy. So what the security agencies need to do is to be sure that they block the leaks. There are too many leaks. It's too predictable that these terrorists seem to know the movement of our troops. They seem to be setting clever traps, launching sporadic attacks against military assets. It's been clear for a while now that there have definitely been inside saboteurs who have been leaking information to these terrorists. And it's enough that this has to continue. They have to do better to be able to block that leak.
All right. As a security expert, what do you think would be the motivation for a man charged with the responsibility of protecting lives, turning around to support those he should be fighting?
The answer to that is very many of these men who are fighting on the side of the Nigerian people, and I'm talking about members of the police force and some military personnel, are being paid wages that cannot take them home. May I remind you that as the current inflation is just 18.1%. the inflation on food has 22.3%, and there has not been a corresponding increase in the wages of these military personnel. They shop in the same market that you and I shop in, and their salaries can no longer. So what do? For them to do that, they have to beg, borrow, or steal. And it's sad to say motivation is quite easy. Once you're going to be paid what you earn every month from the government, there's
We seem to have a little network connectivity issues right there. If you can hear us, would like to know if... anyway, let's see if we can answer this last question before we move ahead. Hopefully the network would allow you to do so. But it appears that there are hardly, if any, there is a vetting or background checks or even surveillance of members of the security services. What do you have to say to this, Ayodele, if you can hear us?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Surely.
Okay. Clearly, I just to round off the last point, which was the fact that military personnel and our officers are bad enumerated. Except to do something about the wages, there will always be the motivation for you to have rogue elements within the force. And then to your question about internal by security agents, of course, there's a whole lot more that needs to be done in terms of the quality of management, because the problem starts from the recruit. And over the years, the due diligence of process, the recruitment of people into the police and the Nigerian army, broadly speaking. I know that the army have better in terms of the people who recruit, but I'm not sure I can say about the police. It must be better at the process of the stuff that we know exactly who that will recruit the police and the military. And once we do that, half of our problems are the surveillance or the monitoring that you want to do internally becomes a lot better. But once you recruit people that you have no clue where they come, then you have a problem in your hand. So I'm sure that the military person inwards, that police will be looking inwards to ensure that they fish out these bad eggs and they stop these Sabua from continuously embarrassing countrymen and sabotaging the efforts of our brave soldiers who are prosecuting the insurgents in the Middle East.
All right, thank you so much, Ayodele Lawal. Thank you so much for joining us on News Central Now. We'll move on now. The news in Nigeria's northeast. Governor Babagana Zulum of Borno State has confirmed that 18 people were killed in an attack earlier this week by the Boko Haram terror group. During a visit to the Damasak region, the governor indicated that 21 others were injured on Tuesday during a terror attack. However, Army spokesman Mohammed Yarima told reporters that the Army launched air and ground operations against the terror group in the region. Yarima also said several terrorists were killed and shelters belonging to the terror group were destroyed during the Army's offensive. We'll move on now to another story that we have for you, and this has got to do with the fact that the potentials, definitely the potentials of a country and concerning medical tourism has to do with this news that is Africa grapples to revitalize its economy from the effects of the Covid-19 pandemic. The debt rates increasing and borrowing becoming inevitable. Economic experts and stakeholders of various sectors have advised the government to actually do well to reduce excessive spending so as to save costs. Some of these excessive spending, according to findings, can be attributed to medical tourism and backed upon by government officials. News Central's Rita Omodia has more in this report.
Every year, thousands of Africans travel to the Middle East and Asia for medical treatment. For several reasons, Africa has become one of the biggest sources of medical tourists traveling outside the continent for medical help. Nigerians spend more than $200 million in medical tourism to India alone yearly. Tanzania, Kenya, Sudan, Mauritius, Egypt and South Africa are also some of the other big spenders on medical tourism.
And in some cases,
recently, Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari came under criticisms following his trip to London for medical reasons, which he termed as a short rest.
The more he goes there, the worse it is for our health sector. And the worse it is for him as a president, because it's a shame that under his watch, the nation's health sector has continued to worsen, while he thinks nothing of going abroad for medical checkup.
Major commentators share the sentiment that when you think healthcare, Africa is often the least place you would think of for excellent medical care.
We must pass a law that says that anybody that comes to lead us in this country must use our system. If your children do not go through our educational system, you cannot lead us. If you cannot go to our hospitals, you shouldn't lead us. If you cannot go to this buy from filling station, go to buy from filling station like every other person do, people like that should not lead us anymore. We should begin to look at people with character, who has precedents, antecedents, who has testimonies of their relationship with people. They don't use our hospitals, they don't use our educational system. I'm sorry, Mr. President, children don't attend Nigerian schools.
During the lockdown, it was discovered that the coronavirus pandemic affected medical tourism, which means that Africa saved a whole lot because air travels across continents were grounded. Now, the bigger irony is that some of the medical facilities outside the continent are being run by doctors of African origin who, having suffered brain drain in Africa, looked for greener pastures.
If you have a clear structured plan and you're very honest with it and you're following that, people can see that you're a work in progress. A lot of people will decide to come back, and that's what you can do to be able to start attracting people back into the system. And when you start doing that, then you start seeing people knowing that, okay, if I can, instead of me traveling abroad to go get this health facility and then going back every 6 months for follow-up like our president is doing at the moment, you'll find that because people know they can get the services here, then they'll start staying back, and that's money is being conserved in Nigeria.
Statistics have it that Africa can attract international attention as a leading destination for cosmetic, prenatal and life-threatening healthcare if it wants to. The global medical tourism industry is valued at $20 billion per year, with nearly 7 million patients seeking healthcare abroad. According to research, South Africa has emerged as a big medical tourist destination on the African continent, with Morocco and Tunisia well positioned in North Africa to attract European patients, which means Africa would acquire more wealth. Rita Omodia for News Central TV.
Away from that story now, in East Africa, opposition groups in Somalia are accusing the Horn of Africa nation's President Mohamed Farmajo of attempts to extend his administration's mandate through the back door. President Farmajo had earlier defended the lower parliament's new elections model of one person, one vote. The resolution, backed by over 140 legislators to set new election timelines, led to the cancellation of the September 17, 2020 agreement between the federal government and federal member states. News Central's East Africa correspondent Abdinor Aden reports.
After months of talks in different venues, with the latest one at the Somali capital, Mogadishu, ending without a solution, concerns are already in the air over the dangers of the nation plunging into chaos following the election's impasse. Earlier this week, the Somali lower house convened and cancelled the former September 17, 2020 elections agreement, which included indirect elections spearheaded by elders and nomination from state level, in favor of a one person, one vote. Speaker of the House, Mohamed Mursal, said that they chose to avert power vacuum in taking their decision to take the nation to the new model, which was signed in February 2020.
Considering the circumstances facing our citizens today, it does not allow a continuation of elections deadlock. Government institutions cannot be held in ransom that can drive our nation into chaos. The citizens expect us to respond to the crisis and bring a solution.
However, the Council of Opposition, led by former presidents Sharif Sheikh Ahmed and Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud, have accused the parliament of extending the term of the current president, Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed Farmajo, an accusation the incumbent has blatantly denied. President Farmajo has also distanced himself from Parliament's decision while also calling for respect to the sovereignty of the Horn of Africa nation.
As a matter of fact, this is a constitutional decision, not an extension of mandate. The members of Parliament fulfill their constitutional obligation. It is clearly stipulated that power belongs to the people.
On their part, the international community, led by U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who have in the past extended support to President Farmajo and the Somali government, have plainly stated that they wouldn't support a partial process, while also calling for a resumption of the September 17-based election talks. The donor partners of Somalia have further threatened actions against those opposing the democratic process to find a path forward in Somalia, while also warning that lack of a political solution will impede gains made in the fight against Al-Shabaab. The Somali military this week marked their 61st anniversary as the Prime Minister joined them after days of fierce battles against Al-Shabaab terror group, and now millions across the nation are hopeful that a solution will be found sooner.
And leaving East Africa now, let's move on to North Africa. Morocco security authorities have seized 4.7 tons of cannabis in northern state, the northern city of Nador. Police said the banned substance was concealed in 47 packages inside a car at Dar El Kabdani town, and 94 more packages were seized inside a house belonging to the traffickers. One person was arrested as investigation is being carried out to determine the trafficking routes of the seized drug. According to the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, Morocco remains one of the world's largest producers of the narcotic plant. Moroccan security services have seized 843 tons of cannabis in the last 3 years. A hospital in Johannesburg, South Africa's largest city, has been razed by fire, with hundreds of patients evacuated to other facilities. Officials say the fire started on Friday morning in a storeroom for dry surgical supplies at Johannesburg's Charlotte Mateki Hospital and burned through the night into Saturday morning. There have been no reports of any casualties, but authorities in Gauteng have temporarily closed down the hospital for structural assessments. Coming up next, Zimbabwe to release about 3,000 prisoners under a presidential amnesty. Details of this and more when we return after the break. Welcome back to News Central. Now to our continued coverage of the coronavirus pandemic across Africa. And let's begin from East Africa. Following the discovery of new COVID-19 variants in Uganda, President Yoweri Museveni says 5 million doses of AstraZeneca vaccine will be imported in May. He said they will be administered on at least 80% of the 5.5 million elderly and people below 50 years with underlying medical conditions. Uganda aims to vaccinate more than 21.9 million people who face the highest risk of the infection, including health workers, teachers, social workers and security personnel. Museveni said government will ensure the vaccination of most adult Ugandans to protect them and to support the reopening of the economy and get children back to school. In North Africa, Morocco's Ministry of Health has registered 587 new COVID-19 cases, taking a tally of confirmed cases in the North African country to 504,847. The total number of recoveries from COVID-19 in Morocco increased to 490,921 after 555 new ones were added. The death toll rose to 8,934 with 7 new fatalities during the last 24 hours, while others also included. The COVID-19 fatality rate in Morocco stands at a huge percent. Meanwhile, over 4.58 million people have received the first vaccine shot against COVID-19 and over 4.18 million people have received the second dose. And in Southern Africa, Zimbabwe has begun releasing about 3,000 prisoners under a presidential amnesty aimed at easing congestion to reduce the threat of COVID-19 in the country's overcrowded jails. About 400 prisoners were released from Chikurubi prison and other jails in the capital Harare on Saturday, with more coming from other prisons countrywide. Zimbabwe's prisons have a capacity of 17,000 prisoners, but held about 22,000 before the amnesty declared by President Emerson Mnangagwa. Those to be released had been convicted of non-violent crimes. Those convicted of crimes, including murder, treason, human trafficking and sexual offences, will not benefit. And over now to international news. Let's tell you that the Duke of Edinburgh has been laid to rest in an intimate funeral at St George's Chapel. The Dean of Windsor paid tribute to Prince Philip's unwavering loyalty to the Queen and service to the nation. The congregation wore masks and was socially distanced in line with COVID rules, with the Queen seated alone. Ahead of the service, the Duke's children walked behind his coffin in a funeral procession, and there was a national minute's silence. His coffin was carried the short distance to St George's Chapel on a modified Land Rover, which the Duke himself helped to design. More than 730 members of the armed forces took part in the event, but there was a limit of 30 mourners inside St George's Chapel under coronavirus rules. And in business in East Africa, Kenya says it will rely on charter flights to boost tourism numbers during the challenging COVID-19 pandemic period. Tourism and Wildlife Cabinet Secretary Najib Balala said this in a Mombasa meeting after receiving the first ever flight from Ukraine to Kenya. Balala said the charter flights Kenya is receiving signals the growing confidence in the country's tourism products and preparedness against COVID-19. The flight, operated by Bees Airline, a Ukrainian charter operator and marketed by travel professional group TPG, landed in Kenya carrying 189 visitors from Ukraine. Balala said the flight was a testament to the advancements Kenya is making in markets which are not deemed traditional source markets for Kenya's tourism. And moving on to sports, Morocco's Hakim Ziyech scored the winning goal for his side, Chelsea Football Club, before missing another chance as they defeated Pep Guardiola's Manchester City by 1-0. Chelsea progressed through to the FA Cup final for the second time in 2 years. The Blues were in control throughout the first half, with City rarely threatening the Blues' backline. In the second half, Chelsea continued their control and were rewarded in the 55th minute. Timo Werner's pace in behind allowed Hakim Ziyech to give Chelsea the lead. Ghana's Ministry of Youth and Sport has granted approval for 25% of football fans to return to various stadiums to watch matches across the country. The decision follows several deliberations between the Sports Ministry, the Ghana Football Association, the National COVID-19 Task Force, and other stakeholders concerned. The ministry added that the National COVID-19 Safety Protocols and the GFA Matchday COVID-19 Protocols should still be observed. Ghanaian President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo announced a ban on football fans at the various league centres to watch matches last year as part of measures to contain the spread of the pandemic. And that's all on the news at this hour. Before we go, let's bring you a recap of our top stories. Governor of Nigeria's northwestern state of Zamfara, Bello Matawalle, has suspended a traditional head for honouring a military officer who was arrested for selling live ammunition to bandits. Morocco security authorities have seized 4.7 tons of cannabis in the northern city of Nador. Ghana's Ministry of Youth and Sports has granted approval for 25% of football fans to return to various stadiums to watch football matches across the country. Follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You can also watch our news and programs by downloading the News Central mobile app on Play Store and also on iOS, and watch us live on Star Times Channel 274. I'm Joe Hansen. Good night.